Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back today with an update to quite possibly one of the most well-received and most requested deck profiles on my channel as of late, and that is Metalfoes. Now, granted, this is a transitional deck profile here. We're still waiting on a lot of powerful Link monsters from the OCG that will drastically change how this deck is played. Cards like Doolittle Chimera, Heavy Metalfoes, Electrum, and even to some capacity Aromaseraphy Jasmine will change the Link monsters that we play in here, and ultimately how many free Pendulum monsters we get from the extra deck for our Pendulum summon. So do keep that in mind. Take this profile, with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, I was able to do a lot of fun experimenting with the card pool that I looked into, some suggestions I got from you guys, and of course the new cards we got back from the Forbidden and Limited list a couple lists ago. So all that ended up creating something different from what I came up with at the very beginning of the Link era, and I'm really happy with how things are turning out, so I decided to share. As usual, this will be a let's build deck profile, so I'll go through all my reasonings for why cards are in here in the quantities that they are, what their purpose is, etc. But if you just want to see the A to Z profile, you can go and click the link in the description box down below or pinned in the comments. As always, it's available for you. And then after that, if you have any questions, you can go and check out the middle of the video to see my thought process behind why things are in here. So let's get started. Our first goal is to decide what we're playing, which of course is going to be Metalfoes this time around. And so it starts off with 4 main decked normal Pendulum monsters of varying levels, as well as 1 effect Pendulum monster. So it's Scale 1 Silvered, who's level 3, Scale 1 Gold Driver is level 4. We have Scale 8s down here, so that's Steelin at 2, Volflame at 7, and Bismugear at 1. And all of them have the same Pendulum effect, letting you kill a face-up card you control to go and search one of these lovely Metalfoes spell and traps directly from your deck to gain advantage during that turn and beyond. So Bismugear also has a cool effect on top of that, so whenever he's destroyed by anything, even scaled, you get to go and add a Metalfoe monster straight from your deck to your hand during the end phase, which lets you make use of this deck's main goal of fusion summoning. So we have 2 on-theme fusion spells directly for the theme, no use for polymerization here. Metalfoes fusion essentially is polymerization, only for Metalfoes monsters, but you can recycle it from the graveyard to draw 1 card once per turn, which is really cool because you never run out of this guy. And then Full Metalfoes Fusion is a quick play spell that lets you go defensively fuse during your opponent's turn to summon your Alkahest, which we'll get to in a moment. It's basically the trap monster of the deck. And then you can also go and use this during your battle phase aggressively, attack with materials, and then fuse into something that continue attacking with, and then push for game as long as it wasn't set by a Metalfoes monster or otherwise that same turn. And then we have 2 trap cards for free resources. So Combination, if comboed with any removal form, even your own, will let you go and tutor out a Metalfoes monster straight from your deck to your hand. And if it's a trap card already active, anytime a fusion monster is fusion summoned, so that's either player, you can go and target a Metalfoe in your grave with a lower level and summon it. So a lot of times you summon your 6, you fuse that into an 8, and you bring back your 6 into your main monster zone, which goes and bypasses the Master Rule 4 of, summon everything from the extra directly to the extra monster zone. So that's very crucial now as well. And then we have Counter, which basically says if a card's destroyed you control, which is always, you get to summon a Metalfoe from your deck to your field. And then in the graveyard, it has an effect. You can banish it any turn it's not been sent to the graveyard to go ahead and add a face-up Metalfoe Pendulum card directly to your hand. Next, we have to take a brief look at the Metalfoes fusion monsters because this is the main reason you'd want to play this deck. The first one is Metalfoes Mithrilium, a staple 3 of in a lot of players' opinions because of its great abilities and stats. So it's a level 6 with 2600 attack, 1000 defense, just needs a Metalfoe monster and any Pendulum monster, which comes in very key for what cards we're going to play in this deck. And it says you can target 2 of your Metalfoe cards in your graveyard and 1 card on the field, and it's either side of the field, doesn't matter position, and shuffle your graveyard targets back into your deck, free recycling, to return the target on the field to the hand. So that lets you reuse your own Metalfoes cards and other effects, lets you get rid of your opponent's cards. A lot of powerful things. You can only use that effect once per turn though, so you really have to keep that in mind. If you're using it for combos, you can't use it for removal and vice versa. And then it has an ability that's unlimited per turn. Anytime this card is sent to the graveyard, even for fusion summoning or popping it with your own scale, you could special summon a Metalfoe Pendulum monster either from your graveyard or face up from your extra deck. Keep in mind, though, you are limited on extra deck zones, so you want to get out a Link monster if you want to use that other ability to the fullest. But a lot of times that means we're going to use cards from the graveyard that we send there, either by fusing from the hand, playing Painful Decision, whatever, and we'll be able to use that. But essentially, if you play 3 Mithrilium, you're always able to recycle all of your non-Metalfoes fusion cards that may not get to the deck otherwise, and lets you cut down on how many copies you're playing, thus increasing the consistency of the deck. Then we're going to play Alcahest. So Full Metalfoes Alcahest is an interesting monster. It needs a Metalfoes monster and a normal monster, which is still very easy to do with this deck. Usually this is set up by Bismugear adding a Metalfoe monster to your hand, and then you fuse with that. So it says it must be fusion summoned, so no shenanigans with this. You can't go ahead and revive it with combination or anything, which is sad because it's level 1 and it would be perfect for that, but, you know, probably too OP. Once per turn, during your opponent's turn, you can steal one of your opponent's effect monsters as an equipped spell to this guy, and then he gains defense equal to the original attack of all monsters equipped to it. So you go and summon this thing during your opponent's turn. It's a quick play version of a Thousand Eyes Restrict, essentially, and then your opponent can't do anything with it. Plus, on top of that, when this guy has anything equipped to him, you can use those monsters as fusion materials if they're appropriate for a Metalfoes monster. So that lets you go for something like Adamante, which is just a 25/25 level 5 monster who says you need a Metalfoe monster and any monster with 2500 or less attack. There is an alternative called Crimsonite. He's a level 9 with 3000 attack and defense, and he says you can go ahead and summon it with Metalfoes plus any 2 monsters with 3000 or less attack, which sometimes, let's be honest, Alcahest is going to steal a bigger monster. But you have to realize Crimsonite needs 2 materials, which nowadays, without free Pendulum for 5, it's a lot harder to justify playing Crimsonite now, even more so than before, where I was kind of hesitant to play it. So, I don't know. Adamante, definitely, because you can go ahead and use that. But I wouldn't necessarily consider, like, you could consider Crimsonite, but you'd have to cut something else in the extra deck for that. And then Orichalk basically needs 2 Metalfoes monsters of any kind. They can even be fusions. He has 2 amazing effects. So this is the 8. It's got 2800 attack, and it says, if a Metalfoes monster you control attacks a defense monster, you do double piercing damage to your opponent, which is awesome. It ends games through tokens out of nowhere with a 5600 blast to your opponent's life. Just phenomenal there. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard from either being destroyed or you fused with it or popped it or whatever, you could target a card on the field and destroy it, which is good defensive and offensive removal. Plus, again, this is your 8. You summon this while you have combination up, and that lets you bring back your Mithrilium for free. And again, the Mithrilium you summon is no longer bound to the extra monster zone. You might have guessed this, even if you've never played Metalfoes before, but they all have the same ability, and that's there for a reason. In order to maximize your pendulum summons and be able to have monsters that you can constantly search cards from your deck for, and be able to fuse raw from your hand, because, you know, Link summoning kind of makes it so you can't summon all your extra deck guys for free. You want to make sure you have as many of these cards as possible. Unlike many other themes, having duplicates, as many as possible in this deck, is not a bad thing. That's actually what we want. So to optimize that, we'll be playing a lot of searchers that let us get Metalfoe full hands. So we're starting off with 2 Painful Decisions, which is fairly simple and fairly standard for this type of a deck. Basically lets you go and add any level 4 or lower normal monster from your deck to your hand if you send one of the same name from your deck to the graveyard, and you can only play 1 per turn. Basically that once per turn clause is the only reason you play 2 of this and not 3. It's basically like Rescue Rabbit, except instead of summoning 2, you get to go and yard 1, which is good for Mithrilium, and then you add 1 to your hand, which is good for scaling, something that Rescue Rabbit can't actually let you do. But nonetheless, we play 2 of that because it lets you go and fix your hands for scales. And then you also play 3 copies of Summoner Art here, which lets you go and add Volflame from your deck to your hand. Lets you add any level 5 or higher normal monster. You could play this with the Cleafort engine. Basically, if you play Scout and Monolith, there is a way to go ahead, pop them, Pendulum 1 back, and then be able to go and summon Cyber Dragon Nova and then Cyber Dragon Infinity. But with the Link era, because you only have that 1 zone and you really want to be able to put a Metalfoe monster there, I don't think that's something that I want to do now until we get some easier access to Pendulum, or excuse me, to Link monsters that will allow me to get Infinity on top of other stuff. So for now, I've taken out the Cleafort engine, but it's definitely something I'll revisit once we have the new Link monsters coming up. Then we play 3 Archfiend Eccentric because of many things. First, it's a Pendulum monster, so you could fuse it into Mithrilium. Second, it's a monster effect that is basically exiled for, so you tribute it, pop one of your opponent's cards, and since it's a Pendulum monster, it can come back and do that whenever you need it for removal. And third, most importantly, it is it's kind of like a almost like a parallel twister, or I guess like a double cyclone. I don't know exactly what card it is, but basically you can scale it, pop it, and any other spell or trap on the board. So that lets you clear Solemn Strike so you don't lose to a huge, Pendulum Summon being wiped out. You can go and pop your own combination, which is crucial in this deck, allowing you to go and fetch a Metalfoe instead of this card. Since you can fetch combination immediately to your field, and it can be killed while face down to claim that effect, Archfiend Eccentric is just amazing for all of those synergies. And then the last big Pendulum monster I like playing in this deck as well is 3 copies of Astrograph Sorcerer. So this is actually something one of my subscribers suggested to me, but basically all you care about it is it's a level 7 2500 attack pendulum monster who has this effect. If a card or cards you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this guy from your hand, then choose one of those monsters in your graveyard, extra deck, or banish that was destroyed this turn, and then add another monster of that name from your deck to your hand. The rest of it is all fluff. I mean, it's a scale 1, which is actually kind of cool because it balances out Bismugear to give you 3 1s, 3 8s, and you have a 7 here with Eccentric. But the biggest thing with this is I think this is a better version of Luster Pendulum in this deck. So essentially what you do is you use your Metalfoe, pop a Metalfoe, and now you can go and summon this, add another copy of the Metalfoe so you never lost anything, and you have a free Pendulum monster on your board that you can now fusion with or attack with because he's a mighty 2500 attack points. Luster Pendulum is actually a little more problematic right now without easy access to Link monsters to fill up our whole extra or main monster zone area, because when you Luster Pendulum for one of your Metalfoes, you lose that Metalfoe, and then you add another copy of it. So that's good in the era where you could Pendulum that monster and every other card you throw in there back. But nowadays, you're summoning 1, maybe 2 guys from your extra deck. If you get lucky and summon a Proxy Dragon as well, maybe 3. So essentially, you're not getting value for freely getting rid of your Metalfoes monsters for no reason. You want the Metalfoes to pop things, and Astrograph Sorcerer at least is a pendulum you can fuse with and makes it so you don't lose Metalfoes while you search. Luster Pendulum just doesn't do enough in my opinion. It's not a bad card. You could still go for Ignister. Non-targeting removal is phenomenal, but it's just not my cup of tea. I prefer the Astrograph Sorcerer. You could play both, honestly. I just think Luster Pendulum isn't the best choice here. Similarly, I don't personally main Wavering Eyes in this build, and the reason is it does the same thing as Luster Pendulum the way I see it. If you're not playing against a Pendulum deck, you're going to end up getting at most the 500 burn damage and add a Metalfoe card from your deck to your hand, or any other Pendulum, I suppose. But the problem with it is when you're just getting one Metalfoe card and you didn't even search off of it, all it can do is free up your scales, I guess. You're not going to be able to Pendulum summon both of those guys back all the time. It's just not worth it in my opinion. Once you can start going and banishing your opponent's cards or searching another copy, that's when it gets amazing, and definitely side this for your Pendulum matchups. But I wouldn't main deck Wavering Eyes unless you're expecting to play a lot of Pendulum Magicians and other Pendulum themes. A card that is more common to Metalfoes and I like playing is a playset of Baobaboon. So this card, everyone loves this guy in Metalfoes. Basically, you summon it and it lets you draw a card and then put any card from your hand either on top or bottom of your deck. And that's really cool because it lets you take away all the Metalfoes spells and traps you never want to draw, or extra copies of Baobaboon, and put them back into your deck so that you'll never dead draw them. And you get to fix your hand up with Metalfoes cards that you can actually continue scaling, popping, and then going for your big plays. On top of that, if this card dies for any reason, you can go and summon 2 more Baobaboons to replace it, and then they in sequence will get their draw hand fixing effects as well, which is insane in this deck because you can summon Baobaboon through normal or Pendulum summon, pop it with your scale, and then get 2 who then get their effects. You can continue fixing your hand. And then most recently I finally decided to cave in, and this is basically a variant of the combo that I do in some of the other decks. It's a mini version of it, but basically you can lay 2 of these for an MX Saber Invoker, detach one which lets you go and special summon a Thousand Blades from your deck. You could choose Goblinberg, but I think Thousand Blades is just better because even though it's passive, at least it'll serve as an extra monster anytime you take damage, right? But the whole point of this is now, with just these cards off of a Baobaboon that you already reaped benefits from, you can go ahead and Link summon your Mrs. Radiant, who's then able to open up 2 zones, and oftentimes this happens before you make any of your Metalfoes fusion summons, so now you can go ahead and summon Mithrilium, summon something else next to it, or Pendulum summon something, and have just more free resources that you have access to from your extra deck. So that is something I really enjoy. Plus on top of that, usually when I play this engine here, especially with a lot of other Garnet-like cards that you don't want to draw, you would play multiples just so you don't completely kill your deck's combo, or you would just pray to God that you don't draw the one piece that, will destroy your combo. But with Baobaboon here, you're never going to draw this and have it matter, because you could just take this and put it right back in your deck, and the one copy is sufficient for all purposes you need. So really perfect that Baobaboon works in this way, lets you go and recycle the dead one-ofs, lets you go ahead and summon the Invoker to use that one-of. It basically becomes easy access to Mrs. Radiant, allowing you to make better use of your extra deck. And I know this is a card that a lot of people don't like as well. I'm not going full Brilliant Fusion Engine in this deck, mainly because I think it eats up too much space in your main deck, and you start getting inconsistent, and Metalfoes do not want to break that. They want to draw all Metalfoes. But with Lone Fire Blossom at 3 and Baobaboon at 3, you now have 6 copies of this, so pretty much every single game, or a lot of games at least, you're going to see your Metalfoes. At least every match, you can expect to see it, You're going to go ahead and summon your Baobaboon with this, cycle through all these, summon your Baobaboon, go off, get your Mrs. Radiant for free, and then you can go and start making your Metalfoes plays. So that's why it's in here. No other, crazy things in here. It's just 3 Lone Fires for the Baobaboons. And then the last thing that I like having in the main deck is basically the 3 copies of Rescue Rabbit, which I have Rescue Rabbit, Coniglio da Socorroso, and Rettungskanenchen. I don't know how to pronounce Italian and German, I apologize, but basically they're foreign only because they were the cheapest I could find back when these guys got unlimited, and they're amazing in this deck. So first of all, they're earth monsters, so if for some crazy reason you want to go, instead of +1, you want to just go and turn them into Mrs. Radiant, be my guest, you could do that. But the way you want to use this is you go and Pendulum or normal summon this guy, you banish it for 2 materials, and you're able to go for 2 vanillas, right? Because they're Metalfoe vanilla monsters. Go Link Spider, turn the other one into Link Spider, and oh wait, what's this? Earth Monster, Earth Monster. Now we have 2 Earth monsters that we can turn into Mrs. Radiant through that, on top of everything else that Rescue Rabbit's able to do. You have 2 Pendulum Metalfoes that you can go ahead and fuse. You can overlay them for an Xyz monster, or, you could go for this. You could go for Proxy Dragon off of that. That's a possibility. Depending on what else you have, you can also go Decode Talker. I like Proxy just because it does have an amazing protective ability. Pops your Metalfoes like Mithrilium, who floats anyway in the process, and it just opens up more zones once you've established a Link Spider or misses. And then Decode Talker is just generically in here. This thing is really in here for backup, but if you want to use it, you could. But that Rescue Rabbit also lets you make the last few slots in your extra deck something more of a toolbox. So on top of the MX Saber Invoker, I like the Phantom Knights of Breaksword because it just lets you get rid of dead scales you've already used, or lets you pop your Bismugear if you scaled incorrectly, and get rid of your opponent's card in the process. You can also just destroy your combination with it, which is also very nice because, you don't always get access to your Archfiend Eccentric all the time, but this card kind of fixes that. And then last 2 slots, I like Utopia and the Lightning, which basically lets you get over annoying monsters that have powerful effects or just powerful attack points, and it lets you win games out of nowhere. You could consider the Cyber Dragon Nova and Infinity with the Cleaforts like I mentioned, but I did like the increased space that I got for Link monsters when I played, got rid of the Cleafort engine, focused on the Lone Fires and Baobaboons and all that. So I don't know, this is just my personal take on the deck. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing this deck profile as much as I did putting the theme together. We'll start off with the main deck here. So we have triple of every Metalfoe monster to maximize consistency, and that includes Bismugear. We then have triple Archfiend Eccentric, triple Astrograph Sorcerer, then for effect monsters, triple Baobaboon, 1 Heroic Challenger Thousand Blades, triple Lone Fire Blossom, triple Rescue Rabbit. Then spells, we have Full Foes and Metalfoes Fusion at 1 each, double Painful Decision, triple Summoner's Art, and then 1 of each of the Traps, Counter, and Combination to round this deck out to 40. Then for our extra deck, we have double Link Spider and a Mrs. Radiant, Proxy Dragon, Decode Talker, rank 3s an MX Saber Invoker and the Phantom Knights of Breaksword, Utopia and the Lightning for our rank 4, and then fusions are 1 Alcahest, 1 Adamante, triple Mithrilium, and 1 Orichalc. That's the end of this video, but if you enjoyed it, I encourage you guys to leave a like and share it so we could spread the video to as many other people who may enjoy the content as well. If you like this series, you can see more of it by clicking the video annotation on the right, or you can click the one on the left to see the last video I did. And if you really enjoyed what you saw today, then I invite you guys to subscribe to JDGaming to see more Yu-Gi-Oh! Updates. Thanks, guys. This is JD Gaming. Hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.